There is a night you have already pictured, even if it has not happened to you yet. A day of ceremony behind you. The gathering, the vows, the rings, the food, the 100 faces that came to watch two people promise something. And then, at the end of it, the two of them alone for the first time as something they were not that morning, a married couple. You carry a whole script for that night in your head, built from films and songs and stories, layered with expectation and a particular nervous weight. Now take all of it away. The ceremony, the vows, the rings, the word married itself. You are a human being tens of thousands of years back, and the thing you call marriage does not exist. There is no word for husband, no word for wife, no ritual that turns two people into a recognized pair in a single afternoon. There is no audience, no promise spoken out loud in front of a crowd. So the question sounds simple, but it folds in on itself the moment you ask it honestly. What happened on an ancient human's first night of marriage, when there was no such thing as a wedding to have a night after? The answer is stranger and more interesting than the romantic version we have been handed. Because the first thing to understand is that the dramatic single night, the before and after switch where two people become a couple in one evening, is not ancient at all. It is one of the newest things about human love. For most of our story, two people did not become partners in a night. They became partners slowly, the way a path gets worn into the ground. One shared task, one shared meal, one shared danger at a time, until one day it was simply true and no one could say exactly when it started. To see why, you have to drop the cartoon of the lone caveman dragging a mate by the wrist, because it is almost the exact opposite of what the evidence shows. Humans are, by the standards of the animal world, unusually built for pairing. We are one of the relatively few mammals that form long bonds between partners at all, and the reason is written into the body, into the slow way human children grow, helpless for years longer than any other animal's young, needing far more than one tired parent can give. A human infant is a project too big for one person. Two adults who stayed together, who shared the impossible weight of keeping a slow-growing child alive, simply did better than those who did not. The bond was not invented by a ceremony. It was favored by survival, long before anyone thought to market with one. The partnership came first, by hundreds of thousands of years. The wedding came almost at the very end. So if there was no ceremony, what actually marked the beginning? The honest answer is that for most of human history, the start of a partnership was not a moment at all. It was a process, and a surprisingly practical one. Among the hunter-gatherer groups that anthropologists have studied most closely, a pairing often began not with romance, but with provision. A young man bringing meat to a young woman's family, again and again, proving over weeks and months that he could feed people, that he would stay, that he was worth building a life around. The gift was the courtship. The reliability was the proposal. By the time the two were considered a pair, there was rarely a single night you could point to and say it began there. It had already been beginning for a long time. And the pairing itself was almost never a private matter between two people. This is where the modern picture really breaks. We imagine love as a sealed thing, just the two of them against the world. For our ancestors, a new bond was a knot tied into a much larger net. It joined families. It rearranged who shared food with whom, who owed whom, which group could count on which other group in a hard season. A partnership was a treaty as much as it was a romance, and everyone around the couple had a stake in it. The two people were never really alone in it, because the whole group was holding the other end of the rope. Now the myth worth killing, because it is the one we cling to hardest. We tend to assume that ancient pairings were loveless, cold arrangements of survival and convenience, with affection being some refined modern invention layered on top. The evidence says the warmth was there from the start. We have found ancient burials of two people laid carefully in the ground together, arms arranged around each other, facing one another, placed by the hands of the people who outlived them. You do not bury two people in an embrace that lasts 10,000 years unless those who buried them understood that the pair belonged together. Tenderness is not new. It is at least as old as the oldest graves we can find. So the romance was real. The bond was real. What did not yet exist was the idea of compressing all of it into one charged ceremonial night, which raises the obvious question. If the partnership grew slowly and the warmth was there all along, then where did the dramatic wedding night even come from? Why do we now take a thing our ancestors built gradually over months and years and try to stage its entire beginning in a single evening in front of a crowd marked by ritual? The answer to that has almost nothing to do with love and almost everything to do with something that only appeared very late in the human story. That something was property. As long as humans owned almost nothing and moved with the seasons, there was little to fight over when two people paired. No land to pass on, no herds to inherit, no fortune to keep inside one bloodline. But when humans settled, farmed, and began to accumulate fields, animals, stores of grain, things that could be owned and passed down, a pairing suddenly carried enormous weight beyond the two people in it. Now it decided who inherited what. Now it merged not just families, but estates. And the moment a partnership controlled the flow of property, the group could no longer afford to let it drift quietly into being over months. It had to be fixed, named, witnessed, made official in front of everyone on a known day, so there could be no argument later about who belonged to whom and whose children would inherit the land. That is where the ceremony comes from. The public day, the witnesses, the binding declaration. Much of it began as a way of putting a clear, defensible mark on a union that now had property riding on it. The wedding, in its origins, was as much a contract as a celebration. And the wedding night, that single charged beginning, is partly the residue of that contract, a recognized, witnessed before and after, a clean line drawn across the exact thing our ancestors had no need to draw a line across at all. Sit with the irony of that. The most romantic night in the modern imagination grew, in large part, out of paperwork, out of the very practical human need to know who owned what and who came next. The deep bond, the warmth, the partnership, the two bodies buried facing each other, was hundreds of thousands of years older than any of it. So the next time you picture that night, the ceremony behind you and the whole future ahead, notice the two different ages of what you are feeling. The ritual is recent. The crowd, the vows, the single marked beginning, that is the new layer, built on settlements and inheritance and the things people learned to own. But underneath it, far older than any word for marriage, is the part that was never invented by anyone. The slow human pull toward staying, toward sharing the unbearable weight of a life with one other person, toward the bond that survival quietly favored 1,000 centuries before there was a name for it. Somewhere very far back, two people did not have a wedding. They had 100 ordinary evenings, a shared fire, a shared meal, a child kept alive between them. And somewhere across those evenings, without ceremony and without a word for it, they became each other's. The night we now stage in front of a crowd, they simply lived their way into slowly, in the dark, with no one watching at all. And it lasted just the same.